He thought he had it all figured out. Sitting behind a keyboard, sipping coffee and firing off clever little jabs, convinced the world was watching and nodding in agreement. The moment he saw Elon Musk and the Dogecoin team, he scoffed. It was too easy. A billionaire playing with memes? Cryptocurrency built around a Shiba Inu? This wasn't serious business, this was a circus. And he had front row seats with a pen ready to tear it all down. He didn't understand what he was looking at. He saw chaos but missed the vision. He saw jokes, but not the strategy. So he laughed. Not a curious laugh, but a smug one. The kind of laugh that comes from a place of thinking you're smarter than everyone else in the room. What he didn't realize was that the room he thought he was in had long since moved on, and he was stuck talking to his own echo. While he was pointing and mocking, someone else was drawing blueprints. While he was writing think pieces about how it was all nonsense, someone else was engineering systems, building networks, aligning pieces like a grand chessboard. He couldn't see it. He refused to. Because admitting there was something real behind the Doge memes meant admitting he missed it, and that wasn't something he could tolerate. So the tweets kept coming. The sarcasm thick, the tone patronizing. Every jab reinforced his own illusion of being on the right side of history. He thought the only thing happening here was noise, memes, jokes, chaos. He never once stopped to consider that the chaos was orchestrated. That beneath the viral tweets, the GIFs, the emoji-filled responses, there was architecture, precision. While he was writing mockery, someone else was building a movement, a financial one, a cultural one, a technological one. It was happening in real time, and it wasn't following traditional rules. That's what made it powerful. That's what made it unstoppable. And that's what made him blind to it. He was still waiting for serious things to look serious. He forgot that innovation often wears a mask of madness until it rewrites the rules. All the while, the numbers kept rising. People who understood the spirit of what was being built got involved. They weren't looking for approval from the press. They didn't need validation from institutions. They saw freedom, disruption, and fun, something that had been missing from the increasingly stale world of finance and tech. They leaned in, and they won. He kept dismissing it. Every headline he crafted was dipped in sarcasm. Every quote carefully selected to position himself as the voice of reason in a sea of fools. But slowly, something shifted. The thing he thought was just a joke began being adopted, not just by fringe users, but by companies, by platforms, by systems. He didn't understand. He scrambled for explanations that didn't include the words vision or genius, because those words didn't fit the narrative he'd built for himself. Still, he wouldn't say it out loud. Couldn't. Not because it wasn't true, but because it meant admitting he got played. That while he was writing commentary, someone else was designing the future. That while he was trying to win arguments, someone else was changing the game board. Entirely. He had made fun of the very thing that outmaneuvered him. He thought he was watching a clown show. What he was really watching was a masterclass in disruption. But it didn't look like anything he'd seen before, so he missed it. Not because it wasn't there, but because he wasn't ready to see someone bend reality while wearing a dog meme on their chest. They laughed at it like it was a joke. A cartoon dog slapped on a cryptocurrency? Surely this couldn't be serious. It had to be a gimmick, a flash in the pan, something for Reddit threads and Twitter memes, not the real world. The reaction was instant and condescending, the kind of sneer reserved for things too bold to fit into neat categories. Memes weren't supposed to have market caps. Jokes weren't supposed to move billions. But something was happening that they didn't understand, and while they rolled their eyes, others were already ahead of the curve. The Doge team wasn't trying to look corporate. That was the point. No stiff suits, no buzzword-heavy mission. Statements, no forced formality. They showed up with humor, transparency, and a surprising amount of technical grit. Beneath the silliness, there was real code, real vision, real ideas about what decentralized finance could look like in a world that was hungry for something different. It wasn't just a meme. It was a movement disguised as one. While critics snickered, Early adopters built. Developers worked quietly, contributors came in droves, and communities formed not around profit margins, but around culture, satire, and rebellion. They saw the brilliance in the absurdity. This wasn't about fitting into Wall Street norms. It was about tearing down the walls and rewriting what access, ownership, and participation could look like. The numbers didn't lie. Volatility, sure, but beneath it, momentum. Transactions, wallets, adoption, the kinds of metrics that make even the most skeptical analysts raise their eyebrows. And still, they called it dumb luck, refused to acknowledge the strategy hidden in the chaos. It was easier to mock than to understand. Easier to dismiss than to admit that a collective of meme lovers might be engineering something powerful. But while the critiques came from cubicles, the wins came from everywhere else. Ordinary people, those who'd never touched a stock portfolio, never sat through a financial literacy course, were suddenly engaged, learning, trading, talking, not because they were promised riches, but because they felt included. The entry point wasn't gated by jargon or institutions. It was open, funny, and weirdly welcoming. And that's why it worked. This wasn't about copying what already existed in shinier packaging. It was about turning the entire thing upside down and asking, what if finance could be fun? What if community mattered more than quarterly reports? What if a meme was more than a joke? What if it was a signal? A flag that said, we're doing things differently now. It challenged everything. The smug certainty of traditional finance. The rules of who gets to innovate. The assumption that value must always wear a suit and speak in monotone. The Doge team leaned into the chaos, but every move had intention. Partnerships were formed. Upgrades were pushed. The tech evolved, the ecosystem expanded, and all the while people who were once ignored in economic systems finally found a place to participate. They were mocked, sure, but they kept going. They didn't need applause from old institutions. They had the internet, they had code, and they had each other. And most importantly, they had a shared understanding that the future doesn't always announce itself with formality. Sometimes it comes in a joke so good that only the smartest people realize it's not a joke at all. In hindsight, it was all obvious. The memes weren't hiding the intelligence, they were highlighting it. Humor became a language, accessibility a feature, irreverence a shield. And underneath it all was a relentless push toward decentralization, experimentation, and freedom. It wasn't polished, but it was real. And for many, that made it far more trustworthy than anything coming from a marble lobby or a glossy brochure. They tried to laugh it off, tried to paint it as childish or naive, but the Doge team didn't flinch. They weren't looking for permission. They were too busy turning laughter into leverage and building a system where anyone, from anywhere, could win. There was no press release, no dramatic confrontation, no need to defend or explain. There was just silence, followed by results. That's how it works when confidence comes from clarity rather than noise. While others fumbled for the right angle, to ridicule what they didn't understand, he stayed quiet and worked. Not behind closed doors, but in the open, for those who were paying attention. The brilliance was in the restraint. There was never any interest in debating with critics or responding to every jab. The work itself became the answer. And slowly, undeniably, the world started to see it. What once looked like chaos began to form patterns. What sounded like madness started to echo with purpose. Those who thought it was just a phase were suddenly scrambling to catch up, while the so-called punchline became a proof of concept playing out in real time. It didn't come with a dramatic unveiling. It unfolded in motion, one move at a time, partnerships here, upgrades there, adoption from corners of the internet and industries no one expected. Suddenly, platforms that had once ignored the movement were now building integrations. Businesses were accepting the very thing they'd laughed at months before. Developers from different disciplines were collaborating, plugging into the system not because they were sold some grand promise, but because they saw the evolution happening with or without them. There was no need to argue. The numbers argued on his behalf. The shift in public behavior spoke louder than any quote ever could. It was never about convincing the skeptics. It was about creating something so undeniably functional, entertaining, and community-driven that people would see the value with their own eyes, not through slogans or campaigns, but through interaction and utility. The critics never saw it coming because they weren't looking in the right direction. They were focused on the surface, the jokes, the memes, the unconventional language. They missed the infrastructure being laid out underneath, missed the engineers working behind avatars, missed the growth metrics tucked inside what they dismissed as noise. By the time they realized what was really happening, it was already too big to ignore. That's what made it beautiful. The very thing they mocked was what carried it forward. Every meme amplified awareness. Every joke kept the spirit alive. Every ounce of chaos acted as camouflage while real systems were being designed and tested. The community didn't need to ask for attention. It earned it, not with perfection, but with participation. Everyone who got involved wasn't just watching, they were contributing, and that made it stick. Traditional minds couldn't make sense of it. They were waiting for seriousness to show up in the form they recognized: suits, meetings, polished presentations. But the message was clear. This wasn't built for tradition. It was built to redefine it, to challenge the idea that disruption needs permission or that innovation must be delivered in a certain tone. It proved that authenticity and momentum could outperform polish and legacy every time. As platforms, media outlets, and institutions began changing their tone, the irony became impossible to ignore. The same voices that once dismissed the movement were now cautiously curious. Headlines softened. Language shifted. The same absurdity they once ridiculed was now being analyzed, studied, even respected. And all of it happened without a single clapback or defensive thread. Just consistent work and undeniable traction. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an accident or a meme gone viral by chance. It was a strategy that bet on the internet's culture, on transparency, on the idea that people could rally behind something real if it made them feel something. And it did. It made them laugh, yes, but it also made them think. It invited them to participate, to own a piece of something alive and moving. And that participation became power. The vision didn't ask for validation. It just kept going, fueled by curiosity, chaos, and a kind of daring that most people only recognize once it's succeeded. In the end, there was no mic drop, just progress. A trail of results so clear, even the loudest skeptics had to go quiet, if only for a moment, to wonder how they missed it. There's something unmistakable about the kind of person who doesn't seek attention, but somehow becomes the center of it anyway. Not because they shout the loudest, but because they move differently. While the rest of the world is caught, up in performance, chasing clout, applause, and public validation, this one simply builds. With focus, with flair, and with a quiet confidence that needs no introduction. That's how it's always been. Rockets, electric cars, tunnels beneath cities, internet beamed from space, and somehow, yes, even memes. That last part is what threw people off. The memes, the humor, the ridiculousness of it all. How could someone serious about innovation lean into a dog-faced cryptocurrency and treat it with the same respect as space exploration? That was the disconnect that made so many miss the point. They couldn't see that this wasn't about choosing between serious and silly. It was about showing that brilliance doesn't have to wear a mask of stoicism. That genius can laugh while it builds. He never tried to look conventional. That was intentional. The goal was never to fit into the mold. It was to shatter it entirely, to make it okay for technology to feel human again, for progress to come with personality. While others polished press releases and sat through endless panels about disruption, he was already doing it. And doing it with a smirk. Because he understood that the world doesn't just need function, it needs feeling. And that feeling often starts with something unexpected, something that breaks the pattern. Like a Shiba Inu grinning from a digital coin. Most people think power looks like prestige, suits, stage lights, structured speeches. But this was something else. It was power in the form of accessibility, power in humor, power in saying, we're going to change the world and we're going to have fun doing it. That was the trick no one saw coming. The idea that you could build world-changing systems and still not take yourself too seriously. That the laughter was part of the design. And it worked. It worked because it cut through noise. People didn't just follow the journey. They felt like they were part of it. The absurdity became a signal. This isn't business as usual. This isn't gate-kept tech for a select few. This is open. It's weird. It's for everyone. It wasn't just about finance or software. It was about creating a new kind of momentum. One fueled by energy, irreverence, and undeniable results. Every time someone tried to write it off as a fluke, the results said otherwise. Every time critics lined up to call it unserious, the markets moved, users multiplied, and attention followed. Not the kind of attention bought through ad spend or PR tricks, but the kind that spreads because people want to share it. Because it made them feel part of something exciting, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. He didn't need to raise his voice. There was no shouting from rooftops, no defensive rants, no need to clap back. The moves made themselves known. Through product, through performance, through persistence. People eventually realized that the joke was never on him. If anything, the joke was the key. And those who got it early were already playing a different game entirely. That was the beauty of it. He let others scoff and speculate while he just kept executing. He showed that you could make an industry shake without ever asking it for permission. That you could laugh your way through the noise while quietly dismantling the systems no longer serving the future. Every meme, every wild tweet, every unexpected decision, it all added up to a kind of genius that didn't need to be explained. It just needed to be watched, and the world watched. First with confusion, then with amusement, and finally with respect. Because by the time they realized it wasn't just a joke, it was too late to pretend it hadn't already changed the game. In the end, the truth always floats to the surface, sometimes wrapped in data, other times in disruption, and occasionally in a meme that turns out to be a manifesto. What started as a laugh became a lesson. The same thing so many dismissed became a symbol of what modern innovation looks like when it's stripped of pretense. It doesn't always wear a suit, it doesn't always follow the rules, and it certainly doesn't wait for approval before moving forward. This story wasn't just about a person or a coin. It was about the shift in how people perceive value, vision, and leadership in the digital age. The rules have changed. Influence isn't just earned through credentials or legacy, it's built in real time, fueled by authenticity, adaptability, and a willingness to explore the absurd as a pathway to the profound. That's what made this different. It wasn't just another startup or another coin. It was a cultural moment. A rally cry for those tired of being shut out of conversations that shape the future. The genius in all of it wasn't loud. It didn't come from boardrooms or institutional blessing. It came from leaning into the chaos and seeing the structure behind it. It came from understanding that laughter can be a launch pad and that real change often begins where tradition stops. That's what caught the world off guard. Not just the success, but the route taken to achieve it. It wasn't the expected path. And that's precisely why it worked. The critics, the skeptics, the commentators, they'll rewrite their narratives. That's how it goes. They'll pretend they saw it coming, or that they never really doubted it. But those who were there early, those who believed in the power of community, code, and creativity, they'll remember. They'll remember how it felt to be part of something that didn't make sense on paper, but made perfect sense in spirit. They'll remember how the punchline became the blueprint. So much of what defines the future is misunderstood in the moment. This was no exception. But what set it apart was the refusal to slow down for anyone's understanding. It just kept going, building, growing, evolving. The story wrote itself, not in headlines or hot takes, but in results that couldn't be ignored. And in the silence that followed, the lesson rang out loud and clear. Real vision doesn't argue.